Every person will participate in a resurrection. There are two resurrections. One is a resurrection to life, the other is a resurrection to judgment. Jesus led the way, preaching the righteousness of God, and became the first, the example to those desiring the resurrection to life. Christ proclaimed a life of death in obedience to the Father. The Apostle Paul said, "Crucify the flesh, so that the Spirit of God may indwell you." It is only in dying to the flesh as Jesus did to this world with its desires can we become united with Jesus in the likeness of his death. It is to those who are so united with Christ is a promise to participate in the likeness of his resurrection to life. What is this resurrection to life? The bodies that we have today will decay and die. In the resurrection to life, the body is changed so that sin and death will no longer have any effect on it. If our inheritance is imperishable, so must our bodies be as well. When will this transformation, this resurrection, take place? Here, Paul states that it will occur sometime during the last trumpet. In the book of Revelation, 7 trumpets will sound. The last, the 7th trumpet, begins sounding off in Revelations 11:15. During the 7th trumpet, several things happen. First, God begins his reign. Next, the nations take issue with God's authority. Then, God's wrath will come. And finally, there will be a judgment of the dead and a reward to the saints. Here, Paul tells us how the resurrection will happen. There is an order of events here. First, Jesus will descend from heaven. Then, the dead will rise first. Then, those alive at the time will meet Jesus in the air. From that time on, all those who are resurrected will always be with him. In describing the resurrection here, Paul mentions that his first fruits will be first. Who are Christ's first fruits? Here in Revelation 14, a certain group of people are described as the first fruits of the Lamb. The first fruits are the 144,000 from the 12 tribes who were sealed back in Revelation 7. Here, they have been resurrected and are standing with Jesus. The rest are resurrected here in Revelations 14 through 16. Note that Jesus is the one coming in the clouds. After this, the wrath of God is poured out on earth. Then after that, we have the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Here we see a reference to those who lived for Jesus previously, living again during the 1,000-year reign of Christ. In following Jesus, those resurrected to life met Jesus in the air and ascended to heaven. They were not subject to the wrath of God on earth. They returned to earth during the millennial reign of Christ and reigned with him. The reference here is that those who come back to life to reign with Christ are part of the first resurrection. Remember, there are two resurrections. The first is for the righteous, for a resurrection to life. The second is for the rest of the world, for a resurrection of judgment. So when does the second one occur? Let's build a timeline based on the book of Revelation, putting the resurrections in perspective. Here are the 7 seals around the book of life with the chapter and verse in which they were opened. Note that the book of Revelation is quite sequential. The opening of the 7th seal releases the 7 trumpets. The 7th trumpet begins sounding in Revelations 11:15. If you will recall, this is where Christ begins to reign. The 7th trumpet then releases the 7 vials of the wrath of God to be poured out on earth. After the 7th vial, the next major event is the millennial reign of Christ and the end of the age. And right before the end of the age, there is the tribulation of Gog. The resurrection of life occurs in Revelation 14, during the 7th trumpet and before the 7 vials of the wrath of God are released. All those resurrected are then returned to earth to reign with Christ for 1,000 years. The second resurrection, the resurrection of judgment and death, occurs right before the beginning of the next age. In Ezekiel chapter 33, verse 21, through chapter 39, there are a series of continuing visions. In chapter 37, 1 through 14, Ezekiel has a vision of the resurrection, where people come back to life. God also says here that he will bring them all back to the land of Israel. In Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 15 through 28, he has a vision of the 2 sticks becoming one. This is the gathering of all the resurrected righteous under the kingdom of Christ. In Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, Ezekiel is told to prophesy against Gog. This corresponds to the tribulation of Gog in Revelations 20, 8 through 9. So here is the final timeline chart related to the resurrections. The passages of Ezekiel have been added. Note that Ezekiel's sequence of events align themselves with that of John's book of Revelation.